Good afternoon. We have people in the audience. This is very exciting. I will now call the Committee on Senate Government Affairs to order, and would the Secretary please call the roll?
Vice Chair Orenshaw.
Here.
Senator Goicoechea. Here. Senator Neal. Here. Senator Hansen. Here. Chair Dondero Loop.
Here. Thank you very much, and all members are present. And I will not go over all the sundries of meetings. I think by the time you get to the 3:30 meeting, which we've all heard it about 10 times today, and I will ask, we have 5 bills to hear today, so I'm going to ask us to keep marching along so that we don't get to what I will call the cocktail edition of this meeting. So we will start with Assembly Bill 378, I believe. Assemblyman Watts, we're happy to have you. Thank you very much. And please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the committee. It's good to be here. For the record, I'm Howard Watts, representing Assembly District 15 in Clark County, and I'm glad to present Assembly Bill 378 for your consideration today. The movement, commonly referred to as the Sagebrush Rebellion, started in the 1970s in the western U.S., and it objected to the federal management of our public lands and sought significant wide-scale transfers of management authority, if not transfer of land ownership outright to state and local governments. Nevada, of course, has had its fair share of prominent sagebrush rebels and public lands conflicts. In the legislature, starting in 1979 with an effort by then Assemblyman Rhodes, we added a variety of policies that sought to establish veto power over federal management actions, assert state claims to vast swaths of public lands, set up processes to manage the lands that would soon be in the state's hands. Ultimately, the vision of that large-scale transfer didn't come to pass, and much of the language that remains in our statutes today is constitutionally questionable and in asserting rights to own and manage lands that were forfeit early in our statehood. With that, AB 378 seeks to remove some of these unused and inappropriate statutes and establish state and local governments under law as partners in the management of our public lands. Working with this in the first house, talked a lot with the Division of State Lands and Eureka County, and worked on the bill as you see it in its first reprint to address some of their concerns about impacting some of their existing duties and activities both at the state and local levels. With that, I'll just walk you very quickly through the bill. Section 14 is where I'll start because that lists the sections of statute that are being repealed. The first is a legislative declaration that signals the intent of the state to continually seek the acquisition of any lands managed by the federal government in the state. Sections 596 through 599 of Chapter 321 declare federal management to be a hardship, purport to give the state management authority over these lands, and create the Board of Review as a regulatory and appeals body for these decisions. A table of boards and commissions which was provided to the Sunset Committee indicates no recent meetings of the Board of Review and notes that in 2015 LCB Legal questioned the constitutionality of those statutes. NRS 321.601 created a public land trust fund to handle payments in lieu of taxes following a large land transfer from the federal government. That section has not become effective since its passage 40 years ago. 321.735 gives the Division of Lands the ability to unilaterally represent state and local interests on issues involving federal lands, roles that I believe are best delegated out by the governor and to the governor and our local governments. And 321.736 requires the federal government to get state consent for its land management decisions, which again I believe is constitutionally questionable. Section 1 of the bill, moving on from the repealed sections to the changes, Section 1 seeks to deprioritize the disposal of state lands, making it one of many management options that are available. Section 3 of the bill eliminates a definition of public lands that by process of elimination only refers to lands administered by the Bureau of Land Management. Section 5 simplifies language regarding the state's technical assistance to local governments on land use planning and changes the shall to may because that work is really dependent on available resources. Section 6 modifies language to promote local government involvement in the coordinated management of public lands. Section 7 removes the requirement that the state include local comments within its own, although it would not be precluded from doing so. Section 8 removes language prioritizing acquisition of federally managed lands. Section 10 removes another constitutionally questionable provision requiring the federal government to seek consent to manage lands in the state. And Section 13 adds the previously deleted definition of public lands to Chapter 487, where it is currently referenced in relation to abandoned vehicles. In summary, AB 378 seeks to streamline our statutes by removing language that is unconstitutional and eliminating entities that have not been utilized. In doing so, it also modifies language to promote the responsible and collaborative management of public lands here in our great state. Again, I just want to express my appreciation to the the Division of State Lands and to Eureka County for working with me to address their substantive concerns with the original bill. And with that, to keep you moving through your agenda, that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions that members of the committee may have.
Thank you. You get gold stars. We have committee questions, and we have the expert on Eureka County with us, so that would be you. Do you have questions, sir?
Not really a question as much the bill itself, and I know you, Howard, you did a lot of work, Assemblyman Watts, you did a lot of work on the bill with Eureka County and getting the language. My real concern is some of the pieces that have been, in fact, repealed, those repealed sections, and clearly, I guess I question, why would you want to remove the grant or denial consent from the governor? And, there's a number of things in these repeal sections that were, even though in your mind they're unconstitutional, have never been proven unconstitutional or even challenged. And I don't know why we're repealing them. Like I say, I can support the bill, but not those sections that are repealed. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for the remarks, Senator Goycochea. Howard Watts for the record. I appreciate that, and again, I did work very hard to make sure that the substantive issues in terms of the State Land Use Planning Agency and the State Land Use Planning Advisory Committee were not negatively impacted by this bill. I would just say, frankly, there's probably some philosophical disagreements that we have, and those are reflected in some of the provisions that I'm proposing for elimination under the bill.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Senator Hansen.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Philosophical differences are agreed. Constitutional, though, Howard, is what you were saying. That's a little different. So I would have to say, being an old sagebrush rebel, big fan of Dean Rhodes and a lot of those things, it goes way back. My concerns are very similar along the lines of what Senator Goycochea mentioned. But I would just point out this. People criticize the Sagebrush Rebellion a lot, but the public lands that you and I enjoy so much, and I'm a big advocate for public lands access especially, so much of that was because BLM and the Forest Service were aggressively trying to shut things down, and the Sagebrush Rebels were the ones that helped keep that open. So you should keep that in mind when we're talking about the Sagebrush Rebellion in mainly a negative thing. And I'd also point out that, we had last session huge fights over the Navy and the Air Force expanding into parts of Nevada. Remember, the public domain in Nevada is owned by all Americans, right? 330 million Americans. There's only 3 million Nevadans. We're not even 1% of the entire population. Yet we want to be able to tell the other 99% what they can and can't do with their public lands when it comes to the military and so forth. So anyway, I'm concerned about what's being deleted, but also just kind of the philosophical things. You know, we want to criticize the Sagebrush Rebellion, fine and dandy, but you ought to give them some credit for some of the great things that they were able to accomplish by essentially fighting back on these public lands closures that were, you know, frankly, about time you were born, that was a huge issue in Nevada. You know, 79 in that window of time. What year were you born, Howard? None of my business, but.
You don't
Anyway,
have to
I don't
ask,
think
you
that's
don't have to
germane to the
answer
Go ahead,
that,
I want
Assemblyman.
hit on the constitutional philosophical question side of it, just out of curiosity.
Thank you for the question, Senator Hansen. Howard Watts for the record. I appreciate those questions and comments. I would share a few things. First of all, certainly land management, public land management has been rife with conflict on every side. As you're aware, the BLM has been given different acronyms by different folks, some who think they're too amenable to essentially rural economies, extraction and agriculture, and others who think that they're beholden more to environmental interests. And we've seen that's part of the struggle of an agency that is tasked with a multiple use mission and attempting to balance that wide range of uses for essentially in perpetuity for future generations. And so there's doubtless going to be conflicts, and I think the input and activism of others has certainly led to some improved outcomes. And that's one of the reasons why I worked with some of the others to modify some of this language to really make sure that we are encouraging and not getting in the way of some of the processes that have developed to support collaborative land use planning and management. And so I would say that I think I have a pretty strong stance that I want to keep access available, but I also believe that particularly our state's earlier history with some of the lands that were within our control was not exactly rosy with some of our state trust lands. And so I'm a strong proponent of maintaining our public lands as a way of maintaining access for future generations. And again, wanted to make sure that we do that in a way that is collaborative, that has input from the state government, from local governments, and that is really what's reflected in the bill. Again, in terms of constitutional issues, I can say that particularly with the border review and those statutes, our own legal staff had raised questions about those as early as 2015. Not being a constitutional lawyer myself, I won't wade too far in, but I do believe that while there is certainly a role for state and local governments to provide feedback and be deeply involved in informing some of the decisions that are made, that ultimately decisions that are made on our public lands that are administered by the federal government, we don't have veto power over some of those things. It can't require that the state sign off on all of those decisions. And so the bulk of what is being pulled out are some of those references, as well as the calls for large-scale transfer, which, again, given some of our history with some of the early state lands that we did have, I think it's better to have a more broad, well-rounded approach in terms of management options. And so that's what some of the other changes seek to address within the bill.
Madam Chair, real quick follow-up. Look, you and I could have a lot of fun with this, and we could talk a long time, because I've been watching this now for 6 sessions. But the one thing where I think we're totally in agreement on, the wild horse issue. I think that's a great example of where if we had the state involved in a direct way, because you and I are on the exact same page on that being a huge mess. But the reality is, when you have the other 330 million Americans helping determine what the horse policy should be in the public lands of Nevada, you've learned that is one big mess when you start throwing everybody in the country in on that one. And I think you and I are on the exact same page with that understanding.
Howard Watts for the record. Yes, we are. That is a very messy issue.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. I'll go next to Vice Chair Orenshall, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Assemblyman Watts, for bringing the bill. I appreciate your passion on this issue. I want to thank you for not disclosing your date of birth, because I think you might make me feel very old, for sure. I don't know about the rest of the committee. And I couldn't help, all the talk of Senator Rhodes. When I served in the Assembly, I had the distinct privilege of serving on the Committee on Industrial Programs with Senator Rhodes, and he was a true gentleman, true statesman, really cared about the state. And I remember when I was a student at UNLV in my Nevada history class studying, Senator Rhodes and how he was trying to, stand up for Nevada against the MX missile and having Nevada become just a huge missile launching site and have all our public lands be, just a big maze of missile launching sites, and what a hero he was. So I appreciate everything he did. I think the verdict of history, sometimes whether we were right or wrong in what we tried to do, we don't find out till a lot later, and I appreciate your bill, but I did want to make those kind of comments. Senator Rhodes was truly a great Nevadan. Pleasure serving with him.
Thank you, and if I may briefly respond, Howard Watts for the record, I appreciate that, and just one thing I'd like to very briefly reiterate is that, again, there are many issues that are contentious and that we can have disagreements on. This is not to say that anybody was necessarily wrong in their decisions. This is just what I believe is reflects kind of the position that most Nevadans are in right now, and the reality of where things have gone over the last 30 to 40 years, and really promoting that continued collaborative approach, but certainly appreciate those sentiments, as well as working together to address the issues of concern. I've worked on some previously as well that had great importance to Eastern Nevada, the same area that was targeted for MX missile deployment, also targeted for large-scale water projects, and have worked with some of the members of this committee in a past life. So,
Well, thank you very much, Assemblyman Watts, and certainly I think we've seen a lot of your hard work on the Public Lands Committee, and you've distinguished yourself as a member of that committee, and I think Senator Rhodes would have been proud of you. So thank you for the bill, and thank you, Chair.
Wise beyond your years. Senator Neal, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I had a question on Section 8. This is the strikeout provision where this piece is identifying lands which are suitable for acquisition for an AB. I was really focused on B, the expansion of a property tax base, including the potential for an increase in revenue by lease and sale of those lands. Can you explain the deletion of that, please? And then I have a second question.
thank you for the question, Senator. Howard Watts for the record. Yes, so in Section 8, it proposes the removal of subsection 2, which essentially tasks, and you can see in the original language, was a requirement with shall, identifying lands that are suitable for acquisition. So instead, what the result of the amendment really is to open it up and be a little bit broader. So it's not necessarily to preclude any identification of potential lands for acquisition or disposal, but it's trying to just broaden the statute out to make those not necessarily the top priority. So instead, as amended, the State Land Use Planning Agency may prepare, in cooperation with appropriate federal and state agencies and local governments, plans or statements of policy concerning the administration of lands in the state of Nevada that are under federal management. And just to be clear for the record with my intent, that administration would include a range of management decisions and could potentially include disposal and acquisition by the state or other entities.
Please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, and then my second question and final, it was following Senator Gokachia and Senator Hansen on 321-5983. What I was trying to figure out is, can you put a little bit more on the record of when is the state, when are the feds required to get authorization from the state to use the land? Because I just want a little bit more context, because that was something that I thought about too, and then when I started looking it up earlier, I mean, there's this whole history, right? There's like this equal footing doctrine and all of this other information out there. So I'm wondering, why was that in play? Was that like a federalism issue? Why was there a balancing act between the state giving authorization?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Howard Watts for the record. I would have to go deeper into the legislative history to give you a completely accurate response. What my understanding was is that, essentially, when these statutes were enacted, there was widespread dissatisfaction with the way that public lands were being administered, and so, and a rejection essentially that that the federal government had the ability to do so, and so many of these statutes were an attempt to assert the state's interests and authority in how those lands were managed. There's also been debate, frankly, about the turning over of lands at statehood to the federal government, and so this was essentially kind of from what I understand, a reaction to that, and essentially asserting that the lands were under Nevada's authority and management, and therefore decisions could not be made by the federal government without sign-off from the state.
So just since Assemblyman Watts, you're apparently the becoming the expert on this. What then remains in state control? Waterways, water beds, what? I mean, I just want to understand it because you said something that made me think that they were trying to assert their rights, which technically in a constitutional framework, I guess they would be, right? 10th Amendment, potentially another amendment. But I'm just saying, that one for sure. Just, so what is it that, if you strike this out, let's say somebody was just like, well, I still believe the state has the right to, et cetera. What law would they challenge under?
Thank you for that question, Howard Watts for the record. This might be something we have to ask legal about, but what I can tell you is there's not a very simple answer. Things are complex, so it depends. Water rights, for example, and there's still some existing portions of statute. If you review the bill, I don't remember the section in the bill offhand, there's a change, but if the federal government wants water rights, they need to go before the state engineer. Wildlife is another interesting one where it's a public resource that is managed by our State Department of Wildlife. So there are certain things with a lot of the provisions of this bill really deal with are specific land management decisions that could be around setting the scope for grazing and agricultural activities, perhaps mining, extractive activities on public lands that are managed by the federal government. And what this is essentially working to do is to say the federal government should certainly be reaching out to and engaging with state and local partners to try and taking their input into consideration to develop a plan for the management of those lands that balances all the interests, but that those management decisions are ultimately made by the federal government and then would be challenged through the same way federal decisions are challenged through that process and system, and that the state does not have the ability to veto those unilaterally or to have to sign off on them before they could take effect.
Any additional questions from the committee? Okay, well, with that, we will go to public support, opposition, and neutral.
Thank you. And if I could just say briefly, Madam Chair, Howard Watts
Absolutely.
for the record, I do need to go start the Natural Resources Committee, so I will not be providing any closing remarks after testimony.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll go ahead and go through this process, and we'll check back in with you later. Thank you for your time today. All right, broadcasting, if you're ready, we'll go to support.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. To testify in support of AB 378, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Again, if you would like to testify in support of AB 378, please press star 9 now. Caller with the last 3 digits of 742, please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi, my name is Emily Walsh, EmilYWalsh, and I'm here supporting the Nevada Conservation League today. The Nevada Conservation League is in support of AB 378. The bill removes several outdated and unconstitutional sections of state law relating to public lands. Nevadans overwhelmingly support our public lands and want to see them kept open to the public and conserved for future generations. In the past, our state has attempted to seize federal public lands and transfer ownership to the state. The simple fact is that Nevada does not have the money or the expertise to manage these lands, and the ultimate outcome would be either to bankrupt the state or selling those lands into private hands. This bill will update our state law and remove language that has proven to have no legal basis. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next caller, please.
Chair, you have no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you very much. May we go to opposition?
If you would like to testify in opposition of AB 378, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 859, please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Janine Hansen, Janine Hansen. I am the state president of Nevada Families for Freedom, and I'm representing the Nevada Committee for Full Statehood. We oppose AB 378 and the deletions. The battle over control to obtain control over Nevada's land by Nevada has been going on for decades. I was a participant in the Sagebrush Rebellion. What is constitutionally questionable is for the federal government to control Nevada's lands. In Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 of the U.S. Constitution, it states that Congress can exercise like authority over all places purchased by the consent of the legislature of the state in which the same shall be for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings. No constitutional authority to control our Nevada lands exists in the U.S. Constitution. Nevada ceded our lands in our state constitution under duress, and it is invalid under the U.S. Constitution. Nevada counties suffer without a decent tax base because so much of our land is under federal control. Lincoln County has self-identified as a welfare county because of the incredible amount of land in their county controlled by the feds. This harms the people in our counties. Nevada has an extraordinary burden, more than any other state, with some 87% of our land controlled by the feds. No state east of the Mississippi has more than 4% of their lands controlled by the feds. Federal management of Nevada's lands has been disaster. Wildfires have devastated and destroyed wildlife, habitat, and rangelands by the millions of acres. This is so apparent if one lives in the rural counties. Near my home in rural Elko County, we have been threatened by wildfires repeatedly, several fires coming within a mile of my home during the last 15 years. The feds ignore local people and their representatives, the county commissioners. When BLM and Forest Service were planning to close many of the roads which had been open in Elko County for over 100 years, the feds listened to the objections of the county and the people and then did exactly what they wanted, completely ignoring the concerns of our local county commissioners and the people. We in Nevada are not the subjects of the federal government. We need to assert our control over our lands and not acquiesce to the unelected bureaucrats of the BLM and Forest Service. Oppose AB 378. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hansen. Next caller, please.
Chair, you have no more callers in opposition at this time.
Do we have anybody in neutral, please?
If you would like to testify neutral on AB 378, please press star 9 now. Caller with the last three digits of 436. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you. I'm Jake Tibbetts. That's JakeTibbitts. I'm the Eureka County Natural Resources Manager representing Eureka County. So, Madam Chair and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to share our view on AB 378. Eureka County is neutral on AB 378 as amended. We acknowledge and support the vast improvements of the bill from the first draft. We wish to thank Assemblyman Watts for working with us to address a large number of our previous concerns that are reflected in the first reprint. We point the committee to our written testimony and proposed amendments from when the bill was in the Assembly to see the language and concepts we proposed that were not accepted and adopted in the current version. We still believe the bill would be improved and it would move us to support if some of the statutes identified for repeal were amended instead. We believe it is important to at least endorse state and county coordination and engagement on public land use planning, management, and administration as a replacement for the transfer and control language being removed. Current federal law and regulation require federal land management agencies to coordinate their planning and management activities with state, local, and tribal governments, and to reach consistency with state and local plans and policies to the maximum extent possible. The legislature should ensure Nevada law has better policy in place recognizing this. As the state with the largest federal land holding in the U.S., it is crucial that the state continue to have strong policy in place to ensure the state and county's voice in public land use planning and management are not diminished. Thank you for taking our input.
Thank you very much. Any additional neutral callers?
Caller with the last three digits of 956. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Dondero Loop and committee members. I am Charlie Donahue, D-O-N-O-H-U-E, and I serve as the administrator of the Division of State Lands. I'm in the neutral position regarding Assembly Bill 378, first reprint. And DSL would like to thank the bill sponsor, Assemblyman Watts, for his willingness to work with the agency and address many of our concerns with the initial bill language. Madam Chair, I have no other additional comments, but would be available for any questions you or your committee members may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next caller, please.
Caller with the last three digits of 280. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Colby Prout, C-O-L-B-Y-P-R-O-U-T, and I'm the Natural Resources Manager for the Nevada Association of Counties. NACO is neutral on this bill in its current reprint and would like to thank Assemblyman Watts for taking the time to work with us and address some of our concerns after the bill's presentation on the Assembly side. We do feel that the current version of the bill retains some of the important roles of the State Land Use Planning Agency in supporting and giving voices to Nevada's counties. Specifically, we're pleased that AB 378, as it's currently written, permits SLUPA to include comments from counties and their own comments on realty actions by federal agencies, and retains the administrator's role in creating programs to increase county involvement in coordinated management of federally managed lands. SLUPA has been an important asset for many of Nevada's counties by helping elevate their needs and voices. Despite mandates under federal law, federal agencies almost never adequately coordinate or consult with county governments on significant federal land management decisions that often affect critical county functions such as roads and other infrastructure, natural resources, local economies, and livelihoods of those living within their boundaries. NACO would have preferred that AB 378 retain mandating language in Section 7 to require that county comments be advanced to federal agencies in the future, regardless of changes to SLUPA's staff or their perspective. But we're pleased to see that SLUPA will still be required to create programs to increase county involvement in federal land management decisions, something for which NACO always strongly advocates. We also appreciate that AB 378 will still allow for SLUPA to elevate county needs to federal management agencies and give counties a seat at the table in federal decision-making. We'd like to thank the sponsor again for his considerable efforts in addressing our concerns. Thank you, Chair and members of the committee, for your time.
Thank you very much. Next caller, please.
Chair, you have no more callers neutral at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, our sponsor is off to another committee, so we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 378, and we will open the hearing on, Assembly Bill, and we will open the hearing on Assembly Bill 87. Welcome to Assemblywoman Nguyen. We are happy to have you here. And please go ahead when you're ready.
Local City of Las Vegas City Planning and Council meetings, probably a total of about 9 hours to get some special use permits for my thing. I realized, do other people have to go through this kind of like bureaucratic mess to get some of the procedures in place? And is there anything that we can do to help this industry in streamlining, but also maintaining those protections for the public as well as property owners that are adjacent? And so, in working with the home builders, we came up with some provisions that have now made their way into Assembly Bill 87. And with that, I will turn it over. I don't know who would like to go next. We'll go to Mr. Hodges, if that's correct, if that's okay. Hudson, if that's okay with Chair.
Welcome, Mr. Hodges, to Government Affairs. We're happy to see your face. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you very much. I'm Nat Hodgson, N-A-T-H-O-D-G-S-O-N. I'm the CEO of the Southern Nevada Home Builders Association. So good morning, Chair Don Loop and members of the committee. AB 87 is enabling legislation that allows for local governments to adopt an ordinance to streamline procedures for the vacation or abandonment of certain publicly owned or controlled easements that are not currently eligible for administrative vacation. People ask me all the time about affordable housing. I often have to remind them that that housing prices are the result of a simple mathematical problem. Price of land, price of material, price of labor, regulatory cost, carry cost, and time. AB 87 seeks to speed product to market, save time and ultimately money for home buyers. This bill saves local governments, employees, time and allows their time to be spent on areas of greater public concern. This policy was a result of a working group with Clark County Commission Chairwoman Kirkpatrick and industry representatives to identify ways to increase efficiencies with the planning process. Like many local governments, county has had many retirements, and less experienced hands make it more difficult to keep up the increasing number of applications. The group identified a handful of changes. One was being an administrative process of technical easement applications where all the relevant, and this is important, where all the relevant parties agree. These applications historically have been approved 100% of the time, so it made perfect sense. When the planning department attorneys reviewed this process many years ago, they found a statutory obstacle. NRS 354 only allows public utility easements to be vacated administratively, not traffic easement, and specify other types of easement types. When identifying common sense vacation types for this bill, it was important to protect property rights and public participation when an easement isn't appropriate for an administrative action. What this bill does not do, it does not vacate or abandon any streets, which Mr. Walker will go into a little bit more depth. It will not vacation of easements that are not supported by all the neighboring owners and impact utilities. That simply means it goes through the current process. Vacation of easements that are not supported by the local government that owns or controls the easement. Pretty common sense, straightforward. It is very important to understand that the owner of an adjacent property and controller of the easement would have to agree of the vacation, or it would go through the current process. It's also, this enabling legislation can save 12 to 20 weeks in the approval process and save many hours of the city and or county's time. This law still has the key protections for property owners and the public. The association would like to sincerely thank Assemblywoman Rochelle Wynn for sponsoring Assembly Bill 87. And now Mr. Walker will go through the great technical parts of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hodgson. Thank you for that description. And Mr. Walker, when you're ready, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Matt Walker for the record. On behalf of the Southern Nevada Home Builders Association, I'll go very quickly through a section by section and just hit some of the highlights before we turn it over to questions. Section 1, subsection 6 of the bill clarifies that when a street is vacated by a local government, the local government must ensure necessary utility easements are recorded prior to the vacation or abandonment becoming effective. For clarity of record, this bill would not authorize any change to the way streets are vacated under the current statute. This is simply cleanup language at the request of our utility partners that codifies existing best practice for street vacations. Section 1, subsection 11 clarifies that this new enabling language does not in any way limit the existing authority of NRS 278-480 for local governments to administratively vacate easements for public utilities it owns or controls. It also requires that any local government seeking to utilize enabling language under AB 87 must adopt its own process via an ordinance at an open hearing. This is a key feature that will allow local governments to customize the process to the needs of the community in an open forum. Subsections 1, subsection 11 outlines key guardrails to protect property owners, utilities, and the public when local governments adopt an ordinance pursuant to this bill. 11A requires local governments that adopt an ordinance pursuant to this bill require all applicants to provide proof of support from adjacent property owners and utilities. Subsection 11B requires the local governments that adopt an ordinance pursuant to this bill ensure that the easement is in the public interest before processing the administrative application. Subsection 11C requires the administrative process adopted pursuant to AB 87 to include a process by which an aggrieved party can appeal an administrative decision. And lastly, subsection 11D clarifies that this administrative vacation ordinance cannot authorize the administrative vacation of a street, drainage easement, sidewalk, or other pedestrian right-of-way. In closing, I would like to thank Assembly members Nguyen and Roberts for helping lead this important discussion by sponsoring AB 87. I'd also like to thank representatives of the Laborers Union, Clark County, Las Vegas, Henderson, North Las Vegas, NACO, League of Cities, NV Energy, Southwest Gas, Cox Communications, and AT&T, who are all very important easement stakeholders that provided feedback to improve this concept that's before you today. Lastly, I would say that there is one party in opposition today, and I was hoping that we could impose on your committee council at the appropriate time to provide some clarification. They were concerned that a local government, say North Las Vegas, might vacate an easement owned or controlled by another local government under the provisions of this bill. When we went to provide clarification on the assembly side, the LCB council simply could not draft language to address that because that's the way the current statute reads and that's the way the bill reads. So whether it's now or later during questions and answers, I was hoping that your committee council might be willing to expand on that a bit.
Ms. Clarkson, do you have an answer to that or do you need to research that? Please go ahead.
Thank you. For the record, Heidi Clarkson with the Legislative Council Bureau. I have not spoken to the opposition, so I would need to see what the opposition is. However, if the opposition is based on the fact that there's a question as to whether the governing body of a local government could vacate or abandon an easement that it does not own or control. I think the language in subsection 11 of section 1 is very clear that we're only allowing the simplified procedure for the vacation or abandonment of an easement owned or controlled by the governing body. So if the easement is not owned or controlled by the governing body, it does not appear to me that the plain language of this bill would allow for the governing body to vacate someone else's easement. However, if there is opposition and they can perhaps explain the issue or point to some ambiguity, I'm happy to address that when the time comes.
Thank you very much. Any additional comments before we go to questions? Okay, with that, we'll go to questions. Senator Hansen.
Thanks, Madam Chair. My question on easements in the public domain, not so much obviously in the city of Vegas or Sparks or whatever, about in the public. Big concern has been people blocking access to the public domain where the easements cross private property, but they lead to public. They start in public, cross private, go to public. Does this bill in any way affect anything like that?
Matt Walker, for the record, on behalf of the Southern Nevada Home Builders Association. While there are certain easements like streets and pedestrian right-of-ways that cannot be vacated through an administrative ordinance adopted pursuant to AB 87, another easement type that may provide access from one parcel to another may be impacted by this bill. And that's why it's so important that local governments adopt their own ordinance, customizing it to their needs, and that the requirements that all neighboring utilities and property owners agree that this is appropriate for an administrative vacation is a critical protection for property owners and folks who otherwise enjoy the property.
I got it, but see, that's my concern, is that we're talking in so many cases a single property owner who can go to a county commission and say, we'd like to close this road that crosses our property, and there's nobody else involved because it involves the public domain crossing private back to public domain. So I'm just wondering if we need to add some checks in there to prevent, to keep this limited to, the urban issues that Nat is addressing, for example, because this may have broader implications in rural areas simply because the check you're talking about, private property owners protecting themselves from other private property owners, is not appropriate in so many of these cases in rural Nevada.
Matt Walker, on behalf of the Southern Nevada Home Builders, through you, Senator Nadero Loop, to Senator Hansen, again, I would just reiterate that pedestrian rights-of-way, including sidewalks but not limited to sidewalks and roads, cannot be vacated through the administrative procedure adopted pursuant to this bill. But we'd certainly be interested in learning more about some of the other recreational easement types that may be located in your district should there be a need for additional clarification.
Absolutely. Well, good. Yeah, I understood your initial point. My point is that this may have consequences bigger than simply, pedestrian rights away and existing roads. It could, in fact, impact easements. Ironically, we're just talking about BLM shutting stuff down, and that's what I'm really getting at. 87% of the state's owned by the feds, and a lot of people own little blocks of land out there, and they then use those little blocks to block off access to everybody else in the state from their own public domain. So I would like you guys to look into that a little bit and make sure that if we need to clean that up, we get a shot at that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Senator Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I had a question on, what section is this? I guess it's section 1 that just goes on forever. Sub 11, it's the notice provision where basically it says the governing body may establish by local ordinance. It's a simplified procedure, but basically it says if the easement is owned or controlled by the governing body, that basically they can do it without conducting a hearing on the vacation or abandonment unless it's for a public utility. And I guess there are two questions there. Number one, why not a hearing, and why would a public utility get a higher standard than anyone else?
Thank you, Senator Neal, for the question. Through you, Chair Dendera Loop, to you, Senator Neal.
And you can go direct,
Thank
Mr.
you so
Walker.
much. Again, Matt Walker for the record. I think that this is an important item that you're pointing out and giving me an opportunity to clarify. One is that there's existing statute that allows for local government to vacate and abandon through administrative process a public utility easement where the local government owns or controls not just the easement, but also it owns or controls the utility being vacated. So in this instance of City of Henderson, where they own their own water utility, they can already do this administrative process and vacate these easements in this manner. So what this sort of awkward lead into subsection 11 indicates is that we're not interfering with that existing statutory authority. In fact, we're copying this tried and true process and then applying it to additional types of easements.
So I hear what you're saying, but maybe I'm saying it wrong, right? So there's the other, right? So the entities that are not a public utility, the local government or the governing body will not have to conduct a hearing. Why? I mean, because that can't be the normal process because this is an insertion of new language, right? And then I have a follow-up to that.
Senator Neal, thank you for the question. Matt Walker on behalf of the Southern Nevada Home Builders for the record. The why is largely, one, all pertinent stakeholders already agree. And we're not capturing the 100% here, we're capturing the 80% where everybody, the county or city staff that's processing the application says, yes, this application is in the public interest. They've verified through notarized signatures that all adjacent property owners to the easement agree that this abandonment or vacation is appropriate and acceptable. All the dry utilities and wet utilities that may be impacted by this vacation all say this is okay. This is the way that some easements are already administratively processed. We're just trying to, for purposes of clearing the agendas to focus public conversation on items that are actually of public interest, to reduce and make more efficient the number of hours that staff needs to spend on each application as it moves its way through the process, and to the benefit of developers who in an infill situation are going to be able to get their product to market and get folks working faster. Those are all reasons why we feel like an administrative process is appropriate where all parties agree.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm going to ask a broader question because when I was looking at the chapter 278, so 278-480, although it's planning and it crosses over to redevelopment. And so I really wanted to get an understanding of the application of this because, you're talking about infill development, but you're also, these provisions walk into redevelopment as well. And so in cities where they're doing redevelopment or changing environments or neighborhoods or where there could be older areas that people want to say in what happens. And I know the developers can agree and they can come to an agreement, but that doesn't mean that the people or the citizens actually agree. Even though you guys are going to move it through, that doesn't mean that the people who would be affected agree. And I guess that's another concern because redevelopment areas are very particular, and there's a higher interest in what happens in the infill than any other area. And so I really want you to address that.
Matt Walker on behalf of the Southern Nevada Home Builders. Thank you again, Senator Neal, for the opportunity to expand on that thought. And that's exactly the type of example that I think is best. When you're talking about a redevelopment or infill development, for instance, the intersection of Link Lane and Las Vegas Boulevard, there was a four-way traffic stop there. There is no longer a four-way traffic stop and never will be, but that traffic easement for that traffic signal remained. And so as that property owner wanted to come in and reinvest and expand their investment in that parcel, jazz it up with some new signs and new development, move the sidewalk to accommodate that new development, they first had to come in with an application to vacate that traffic easement. And then that went to the town board. And then first it waited for an application appointment. Then it went to the town board. Then it went to the planning commission. Then it went to county commission. What we're trying to say is where everybody can agree in that scenario, let's move that through an administrative process, and then let's focus the public conversation of the town board, planning commission, and county commission on what the project's actually going to do. Let's remove this intermediary step, focus the public conversation on what the actual project is, and then get those men and women back to work faster in that infill development scenario. So we feel like we're striking the balance here by not allowing for administrative vacation of streets, by not allowing for vacation of other pedestrian type rights of way. We're striking that balance between focusing the conversation on what the actual project is, but while eliminating some of these more technical steps that clog up those agendas. If you've ever waited at City of Las Vegas Planning Commission or another planning commission until 4 in the morning till your item comes up, I think it's hard to say that there's meaningful public openness and input at that point. At some point, when you're there past midnight, it kind of feels like there's got to be a better way to do that, and that's what kind of sparks some of these conversations. How do we eliminate some of these more technical items and get the conversation focused on what the actual development is?
And instead of discussing what the purpose was behind the redevelopment project, or what kind of impact it had on the community, or what kind of other social impacts that it would have, what kind of economic developments and what kind of impacts it would have, there was time dedicated to things that in other aspects are done administratively when all parties agree. So that was kind of some of the thinking, and I think Mr. Walker kind of illustrated, what the intent is behind this bill and how there are still protections for those bigger policy concerns by maintaining some level of efficiency on things that all parties can agree on.
So I was just going to say one more thing after this, Madam Chair. I get the experience that you had, Assemblywoman, but I've been in a planning meeting where all parties did agree, the developer, the city, but the residents did not. And they were not on board with what was happening to them, and that the notice that they received that's required triggered them to be participants in that planning meeting and to then have their voice heard. Same thing in a West Las Vegas situation, right? And so these notices, although administrative, are sometimes the trigger that something is happening in your area that you're not aware of, because nobody sits and watches planning all day hooked up to the TV saying, oh my God, I can't believe they did this 400 items and looks like it affects me. It is something else that either shows up on a fence or a gate that triggers you to say, I need to pay attention to that particular planning meeting because it's affecting me and my neighborhood. And so if you're saying the protections exist, I guess this piece in sub 11 to me would open the door for them to do an activity that I know I actively fought against, where they were in agreement. And that would have been like, oh, it would just push it on through to the council meeting. And then we wouldn't have had a say at the planning stage. And although they were like, oh, this vote goes to whatever, it was very important to watch the stages of an issue where we weren't in agreement. And so I don't know how I'm hearing what you're saying, and I'm hearing about, regular people are just like, I just want you to get the rest of the business done. But there are some things that go on that people should be aware of, and they're not a public utility. And I may be extending this out, but I want notice, and I want a freaking hearing on things because they mean something to someone else. They don't mean something to someone who has a particular agenda to just get through their stuff. But I've already encountered just last year where this would have caused us to be sitting on the sideline and a behemoth building built, and the residents would have been like, oh, so they all agreed. Okay.
Madam Chair, Matt
Go
Walker,
please.
on behalf of the Southern Nevada Home Builders, and Senator Neal, I definitely sympathize with you. I happen to record every planning commission meeting, so I'm probably in a very small minority there. But I would say that when it comes to changing the land use, when it comes to approving individual projects through a design review, all of the really, really critical conversations that take place at those planning commissions and town boards in places across Southern Nevada, we really want to clear those agendas for those items, so that, because again, I don't think that that community member on the west side having to wait until midnight or having to wait until 1 o'clock for that item to come up, I think that impedes their ability to meaningfully participate in the process. What we feel is the appropriate balance is taking those sewer privatizations, those vacations of traffic easements, those small, more technical steps in the process. We can take those off the table and fill the agenda with really meaningful public conversation about zoning changes, projects, et cetera.
Thank you very much. Vice Chair Orenshaw, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Assemblywoman Nguyen, for working so hard on this legislation, and Mr. Walker, Mr. Hodgson. My question has to do with trying to get the notarized signatures, and I appreciate you walking me through the process prior to the hearing of the bill, Mr. Walker, but, you know, I've got one neighbor who, he's retired, and I see him, you know, maybe a month in the spring, a month in the fall. He tries to avoid the really hot months. And we get along pretty well, and if I needed a vacation of an easement, he'd probably be supportive, but tracking him down to get a notarized signature could be a challenge. And so if the bill passes, my concern is if I can't get a hold of my neighbor who travels a lot with his wife and goes on cruises and stuff, at least prior to the pandemic, but hoping to resume, would that lack of that signature, would that veto the vacation or the abandonment, or could you explain the process? You'd mentioned to me that there could be a public hearing, and I just wondered if you could explain how this would work if this passes.
Matt Walker, for the record, on behalf of the Southern Nevada Home Builders, and thank you, Senator Orenshaw, for the question. Essentially, whether it's because your neighbors don't agree, or maybe staff doesn't agree that this is a good idea to vacate this easement, or if you just simply can't track your neighbor down who's taking a break from the heat, in all those cases, you'd be left with the status quo. And what the status quo is a full public hearing process for your vacation request. So you're going to be able to go through, have the notice sent by the city or county, go through the town board process, et cetera. Whether it's because you don't have a qualifying easement, your neighbors couldn't agree, or you just couldn't track them down, you'd be left at the status quo. So nobody would be barred from seeking an easement. They just may not be eligible for the kind of common sense what everybody can agree on for an administrative vacation process under the bill.
Okay, thank you. That gives me a lot more comfort. And Chair, if I may have one follow-up. Would the universe of neighbors I'd need agreement from be the ones who are just geographically contiguous to my property? Or let's say the easement I'm trying to have vacated goes, 20 houses down the hill. Would it be every neighbor who's touched by the easement that I'm seeking to vacate?
Matt Walker, for the record, on behalf of the Southern Nevada Home Builders. Everyone who's adjacent to the easement, including those underlying the easement or utilities that may be impacted by the easement, are their verification of approval needs to be submitted in order for an applicant to take advantage of this administrative process, should the local government adopt an administrative process by an ordinance. And we think that those are key protections that are important. And that may mean that in a large-scale easement situation that it's simply not worth the trouble to track down all these folks. And we fully recognize that there may be some limited utility because of that important property protection. And we just thought that it was the appropriate balance.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And Chair, the hill I live on is Frenchman Mountain, which there's another bill on that one, but not in your committee. Thank you, Mr. Walker. Thank you, Assemblywoman.
Thank you very much. And I don't live on a hill, but I do live by a dead golf course. So I want that little piece addressed.
Matt Walker, for the record, on behalf of the Southern Nevada Home Builders Association. That is a great example of an area where both the developer and the neighboring property owners' property rights need to be respected and not interrupted or preempted by any legislation. And so we've worked diligently with representatives of the Queensbridge homeowners as well as representatives of EHB, Mr. Lowy, to ensure that the language did not benefit or advantage either party in that scenario or any other contentious development scenario. Again, this is for the 80% where everybody agrees, and it should leave other parties where they don't agree completely back at status quo, which is going before their local governing body and having those important discussions. Additionally, I would just add that drainage easements and pedestrian rights-of-way were specifically taken out of the bill to avoid there being any overlap with an ordinance that may be adopted by a local government in that particular scenario.
Okay, thank you. Assemblywoman Nguyen, did you have something?
Yes, please. Rochelle Wynn for the record. It came to our attention that there were some concerns that this was like an intentional decision to try to, I guess, insert ourselves or insert the legislative body into potential litigation, and that is not our intent. In fact, we've made very specific attempts at trying to make sure that this is narrowly tailored to strike that balance between maintaining public notice and efficiency in the process.
Okay, I'll get back to you on that. Thank you. Senator Gocochea.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I've just got a couple of real brief questions. It says in the bill, when a person is aggrieved, at what point or how do you bring that grievance forward? How would you know about it? Because the next step is it's actually approved and recorded. So at what point do you raise your grievance? With who? How?
Matt Walker, for the record, on behalf of the Southern Nevada Home Builders. Thank you, Senator Gocochea, for the question. That is when the notice of final action records, and that is a standard process for administrative processes across Southern Nevada, at least is what I'm familiar with. And so in that scenario where, for instance, a typical administrative process would be I'm changing my sign, but it's all within the square footage that was approved by the commission, that the notice of final action does record and is publicly available, and neighbors or other parties at that point could petition that administrative decision was improperly decided, and they can then petition to the county commission or city council to take a public look at that decision. Similarly, when your application is rejected for an administrative request, such as this one, the ones contemplated under this bill, you then have the ability to petition on forward. If say the public works director says this isn't in the public interest, you'll have the ability to petition and take that on to the county commission anyway.
And then would that, in that point, if I may, Madam Chair, would that trigger a public hearing? Or I'm just concerned at that point, maybe after the fact, somebody wakes up and, oh man, I missed that. But it's already a recorded document, and we know how tough it is to get back up the hill. So I'm concerned about that. That's my only concern. Thanks, Mr. Walker.
And Madam Chair, if I may, Matt Walker for the record on behalf of the Southern Nevada Home Builders. That's a really important component. Anytime you have an administrative process, it's important that the appeals process be really, really clear, and that's something that we anticipate local governments defining in terms of the number of days, et cetera, in that ordinance that's adopted in order to enact the provisions of this bill. I wish I could tell you that there's a rule of thumb, whether it's 30 days or 60 days or 10 days, but various administrative actions as adopted by local governments have different notice provisions and different number of days associated with them. But that's something, certainly as a representative of folks who own property, I would be tracking very closely as I participate with local governments when they adopt this ordinance.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Any additional questions from the committee? All right, there'll probably be some offline, but thank you very much. And if you don't mind, we'll go to support, opposition, and neutral.
And Madam Chair, if it's okay with you, I do have to go back to Terry
Please.
by committee. So if I could excuse myself, I know you are in capable hands here.
Yes,
Mr.
thank
Walker.
you very much.
Thank you.
Broadcasting, when you're ready, we'll go to support.
Thank you, Chair. If you would like to testify in support of AB 87, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 175, please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits of 175, please press star 6 now to unmute yourself. Thank you. Please begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Dondera Loop and members of the committee, Lindsay Knox, Lindsay, Knox, K-N-O-X, with McDonald Carano on behalf of the Builders Association of Northern Nevada and the Nevada Home Builders Association. In the construction industry, time is money. BAN and NVHBA consistently call for improved efficiencies and expedited processes with our local governments. The vacation or abandonment of an old and a needed easement can take weeks or even months, even when there is no disagreement or dispute whatsoever. This bill proposes an expedited and simplified procedure to vacate or abandon these uncontroversial and unnecessary easements, allowing construction to progress without undue delays. We thank our colleagues at Southern Nevada Home Builders Association and the bill sponsors for bringing this bill forward and view it as a common sense and useful tool in the development and construction process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next caller, please.
If you recently just joined us, we are currently in support of AB 87. If you would like to testify in support, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 323. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Yes, my name is Steve Walker, and Madam Chair and committee members, Walker, W-A-L-K-E-R. I am representing Lyon and Douglas County in support of AB 87. Simplifying a common procedure and enabling efficiencies by allowing the adoption of an ordinance to deal with easement abandonment just makes good sense. We are in fully support of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next caller, please.
Chair, you have no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you very much. We'll go to opposition.
If you would like to testify in opposition of AB 87, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, you have no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you very much. We'll go to neutral.
If you would like to testify neutral on AB 87, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, you have no callers neutral at this time.
Thank you very much. And with that, Mr. Walker or Mr. Hodgson, do you have a closing comment?
Just thank the committee for their time, Matt Walker for the record, and because you still have quite a bit more business to get to, we'll leave it at that, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your time, and as I said, Mr. Hodgson, very good to see you. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you very much. And with that, I will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 87, and we will open the hearing on Assembly Bill 139. And with that, we have Senator Scheibel. Welcome.
Thank you. Are you ready for me to proceed?
Please go ahead when you're ready.
All right. My name is Melanie Scheibel. I am the state senator for District 9 in the southwest part of Las Vegas, and it is my pleasure to be in front of the Senate Committee on Government Affairs today presenting AB 139. Yes, it is an assembly bill, but it is near and dear to my heart because a public facilities needs assessment was conducted in 2020 by Clark County for the southwestern portion of the Las Vegas Valley. And that study found that 2 additional fire stations are necessary to maintain the 4-minute response times throughout the Southwest, including in District 9. However, the fee revenue that had been collected in the area for this purpose was not adequate to meet the need. Therefore, Clark County Commissioner Jones, Assemblyperson Yeager, and I are happy to partner with the development community and first responders to bring you AB 139 that will accelerate development of fire stations in the rapidly growing Southwest. The bill is a creative solution that will increase public safety, create prevailing wage construction jobs to support our economy recovery, and help all of those who live in the southwest part of the valley. Nat Hodgson from the Southern Nevada Home Builders will discuss the specifics of how the bill developed and how building enterprise funds are managed by local governments. If you will allow me to turn the presentation over to him.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Well, little did I know, Mr. Hodgson, that you would be back so quickly. Welcome back to Government Affairs, and please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. Again, Nat Hodgson for the record, CEO of the Southern Nevada Home Builders Association. That's NATHODGSON. I guess good late afternoon, Chairwoman Don Derloop and members of the committee. As Senator Scheibel did outline, about 20 years ago, there was a facility needs assessment done that zeroing in on the southwest area showed that they were in need of 2 fire stations. In 2019, under Chairwoman Kirkpatrick and Commissioner Jones' leadership, a group of stakeholders got together supporting the index of the PFNA with 100% increase, which we did support, 100% increase, which I probably won't say again. And these dollars still can't fill the gap, though. It was a 20-plus year gap. The good news is we did index it for inflation, so the goal is hopefully not be in this position again, but there's a gap that we believe this bill fills. As you'll see in the PowerPoint presentation, all developer fees for permits and plans are paid in the Building Enterprise Fund. An advisory committee of county staff and industry representatives oversee the fund. As a custodian of these funds and as an industry member who is committed to funding targeted service levels, a healthy balance of these funds is critical and very important to me. I or a member of my staff currently sit on the advisory committee of Clark County, City of Henderson, and City of Las Vegas. I've served on county's Building Enterprise Fund, which this bill is aimed at, for over 8 years, and still currently serve as a residential home building representative. The committee is comprised of developers from the largest sectors that pay into the fund, including residential, commercial, gaming, and resort associations. We are briefed by the county management and the building official on a frequent basis and have meaningful dialogue on ongoing challenges faced by the industry and have a finger on the pulse of the large budget items, staffing levels, infrastructure needed by the county employees at all these meetings. The PowerPoint has been provided to you, has a map of the targeted fire service levels in unincorporated Clark County. We wanted the committee to hear from an expert, so Todd Anglesby, president of Professionals Firefighters of Nevada, will now walk you through the service level maps and provide additional comments on what service levels mean for members of the public and his membership. Afterwards, Mr. Matt Walker will go through the section-by-section amendment. So I will turn it over. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Inglesby, welcome to Government Affairs.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Todd Inglesby, Todingalsbee. I'm the president of the Professional Firefighters of Nevada. I hope you all are doing well and staying safe. As you've heard from the other presenters, as Nevada has grown and continues to grow, it is vital we have infrastructure in place to be able to provide essential safety services. As you can see in the heat maps that were provided behind, we're very behind in the Southwest Valley and in Southern Nevada, but this is an issue for the entire state. We are here asking for your help for this bill. This bill will help current and future residents, along with millions of visitors we hope to have back in our state soon. The lack of fire stations and personnel creates a safety concern when we are not able to meet the national standard of a 4-minute response. That means that when you call 911 in an emergency, you should have fire personnel to your location within 4 minutes. If your mom, dad, brother, or sister or son are having a heart attack or drowning, 4 minutes is a long time. Imagine if it was 6, 8, 10 minutes before you had fire department personnel at your door to start initiating care. I'm not sure if any of you have had to call 911 before, but 4 minutes can seem like an eternity. Everything we do is about getting to the emergency as fast as possible for the best outcome. We are taught very early in our careers to treat every person as if they are family. When considering this bill, I would ask the committee to do the same. If your mother or daughter or son or father or wife was having a heart attack or drowning, or your house was on fire, what would you want for them? A 4-minute response or a 10-minute response? The state has and continues to see massive growth, especially with our large master plan communities. When buying your dream home, people think to research the school districts and the proximity of work, grocery stores, etc. But what is often forgotten is, where is the closest fire station? Most people assume that the city or the county is ensuring all those homes are only built if the basic safety infrastructure is in place. Unfortunately, that's not the case. If the closest fire station is 10 minutes away, with lights and sirens that can be detrimental to a person's health, their home, and safety. That also assumes that when you call 911, that the closest station isn't already out on another call in the area. We wish we could get to every call quicker than 4 minutes, and anything more than that is unacceptable. Thank you again for your time and consideration on this bill. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Walker?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Matt Walker for the record on behalf of the Southern Nevada Home Builders Association. So before I start the very brief section by section, I just want to kind of recap that timeline that Mr. Hodgson covered. So in 2001, the county, Clark County, adopted a fee, a public facilities needs assessment fee for the Southwest, specifically for fire infrastructure. That fee, when we hit the Great Recession, was never increased. And so by the time growth caught back up in the Southwest and they needed those 2 fire stations, as evidenced by the public facilities needs assessment adopted in 2019, the cupboards were bare. So as Mr. Hodgson indicated, the home builders and other developers stepped up to the table to double that fee and then index that fee to inflation going forward to make sure that we never ended up in this situation again, where there's such a meaningful gap between the fire needs and the fire funding available for those capital improvements. This bill really is about bridging that gap, that temporary gap, and so I'll walk you very quickly through a section by section on how this bill addresses that gap. So Section 1, subsection 1A makes it clear that this bill is targeting money in the Building Enterprise Fund that is over and above the statutory cap set by NRS 354.59891. Section 1, subsection 1B states that the local government must have adopted the findings of a public facilities needs assessment pursuant to NRS 278.02591 within the dates specified in the bill. Section 1, subsection 2 makes it clear that the funds transferred for this purpose are exempt from the cap in NRS 354.59891. In recognition that this temporary authority granted to local governments is being granted to local governments with the intent that they act quickly to address the identified need for fire stations, Section 1, subsection 3 sets timelines for the specific transfer of funds and return of all unused funds. If the committee adopts the proposed amendment developed in coordination with Clark County, local governments would have until June 30th, 2021 to transfer eligible funds and must return all unspent funds by January 2024. Lastly, Section 5, subsection 2 sets an expiration date for this temporary enabling statute, and that would be June 30th, 2024. Lastly, I would like to thank the Nevada Resort Association, MGM, Red Rock Resorts, NAIOP, and all the very important enterprise fund stakeholders that allowed this conversation to progress forward. I'd also like to thank Commissioners Kirkpatrick, Jones, and Clark County Building Official Jerry Stevie for their leadership and open communication on this proposal, as well as all the great state elected representatives for this area, Assembly Members Yeager and Gorlow, and Senator Scheibel for leading this important public safety conversation. This bill really is about the Southern Nevada development industry stepping up during a challenging fiscal time for Clark County and finding an innovative solution to bridge this important public safety infrastructure gap. And with that, I will close and take any questions and comments the committee may have.
Thank you very much. Did I hear you reference an amendment?
I apologize. I was using old notes again. Matt Walker, for the record. Those comments are now incorporated into the first reprint that you see before you.
Okay.
I apologize for the.
That helps.
I
And
won't
then
start too
would
closely.
you, before we go to other questions, would you please reiterate or clarify the area that we're kind of talking about?
Matt Walker, for the record, on behalf of the Southern Nevada Home Builders. First, I'll say that this bill doesn't necessarily steer this money towards any particular area. It simply authorizes the local government that where they've conducted a public facilities needs assessment and they have reserves that are over and above the statutory cap in their building enterprise fund to use them for public safety infrastructure. I think the intent here in working with Clark County commissioners and other stakeholders is that they put those funds to use in the areas where the most population in Clark County is not covered by 4-minute response times at the current moment. And that is, as you'll see on the map on Nellis as part of the presentation, largely focused around the southwest portion of Clark County.
Okay, thank you. Questions, committee? Senator Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So what I'm super curious about is how are fire stations normally paid for? Why isn't this coming out of capital improvement or a special assessment bond? And there are other ways to pay for this rather than trying to change the structure of an enterprise fund.
Matt Walker, for the record, on behalf of the Southern Nevada Home Builders. Madam Chair, may I go direct to members on questions for this one?
Please go ahead when you're ready.
Okay. Senator Neal, that's a great question. I'd say that fire stations are typically funded in two typical scenarios in Clark County and Southern Nevada. One is in the case of a master plan development. The master plan developer often directly provides funds for those fire stations. So you can think of a couple of really large master plan communities in the western part of Southern Nevada. They've either constructed or directly funded the construction of all the fire stations necessary to serve the new units associated with that plan community. In the case of an area like the Southwest where it's developed in smaller pieces, 10-acre and 40-acre parcels, typically a local government will anticipate the future need for the fire station and then assess a fee, an impact fee, for the developments as they come in. But again, because the fee wasn't adjusted from 2001 all the way up until 2019, that fee just simply was no longer reflective of the true cost of constructing a fire station today. That's what leads us to the gap that's being addressed by this bill.
So, but I'm still not clear on why this isn't a part of capital improvement. So I know this bill was coming forward and I was looking through, like, I watched you guys' hearing on the other side, and then I was trying to look through the Clark County budgets and trying to get an idea of, the fire districts and how much revenue was actually operating. And so I know that one of the second ways that it could be paid for, Clark County has a fire service district with a capital fund. And I guess I'm super confused because when I saw the budget, there was a transfer that came from the general fund into that fund. So why aren't we just asking for a transfer from the general fund into that fund? And the reason why I'm asking that is because you can't say it's a Great Recession, right? We're not walking back to 2011. We're not going to do that. Even in the circumstance of 2020 where, yes, all budgets were hit, Clark County actually got a buffer, right? So they were able to get a buffer and try to offset some of their losses. They actually got a larger amount. So that allowed them to maneuver and do some other things in 2020. And so I need to be clear about why this is the necessary pathway, because I've seen enterprise funds used before, and I know this one has an expiration date. But in another hearing, a long time ago, same thing was used and they've never taken it out. And all they did was walk back with a whole new set of members and ask for that expiration date to be removed so they could continue to use it. And it is never returned back to the fund that it was supposed to be used for. It's still in play, freaking 11 years later. So I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of this bill. It's not against fire, but I don't like enterprise funds being shifted and being replayed for other uses.
Thank you for the comment, Senator Neal. Matt Walker for the record on behalf of the Southern Nevada Home Builders. I would say that we're hopefully different from that other enterprise use, fund use, because we're asking for permission before the transfer happens and not after the fact. But nonetheless, we do think this really is the product of two key dynamics that would prevent general fund from having to be used from the county. That of course there's many needs for that general fund, probably now more than ever, for those vital community services. One is there's a need and a fee that did not catch up with inflation and has now been solved and indexed. So we're really just trying to fund the gap. The other scenario where those fees pay for this fire station means even further increase in those fees for the Southwest, and then a delay in maybe years before that project can finally go to design. The other key dynamic is that there's an extremely healthy fund balance with the Building Enterprise Fund reserves in Clark County at the moment, because we've had several large projects run through. So we've had the Raider Stadium, we've had the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors project, we've had Resorts World. So we are meeting our needs for the service levels at the county, and we're able to reprioritize money that would otherwise be returned or expended on other less critical capital expenditures, and really reprioritize that for public safety. So we see the stakeholders that would be hit with the additional impact fee as being the same as the stakeholders that paid into this fund. And instead of reducing the existing fund balance through additional capital expenditures for the Building Enterprise Department, or returning that money, I think that there's a large amount of development stakeholders that are willing to see it put to better use within the limitations of the bill and with the appropriate oversight and transparency. And I apologize, Madam Chair, but and this will build the fire stations faster, 3 or 4 years faster than allowing for those fees to accrue, which is another huge benefit for folks like myself who live in the southwest part of the valley.
So thank you for those comments, and Madam Chair, I'm going to leave this alone after this comment. Just because there's excess doesn't mean that you get to come in and change the statute to reprioritize it for another use. It is set aside for that exact purpose. And this is not the precedent that we'd like to continue. I personally, that's my personal opinion, I don't want to continue this in this building, because I do think that there are other ways in order to fund that. And Clark County they have been hit, but when I was looking at their tentative final budget, I think that there's potential there for them to rearrange other funds, not to go into the enterprise fund. Excess does not mean raid. That's not what it means. And it certainly doesn't mean just because stakeholders agree to go into that fund, you come and change the legal purpose of it. There's a whole bunch of outstanding questions on why didn't they reduce the levy, knowing that it was increasing and they have this excess, because ultimately what they did, they allowed it to build and they knew they didn't even need the money. They could have lowered that rate and they didn't. And that question has not been answered. I didn't see that question answered, and I mean, hopefully, I don't know if the county is planning on speaking at this hearing, but I have huge questions with them being able to pull this kind of act in the legislature around enterprise funds. So, and I'll just leave it there, because I don't think I'm going to be persuaded, because I've seen this in play. And I understand what's out there, but I know that there are at least 3 other ways to try to get that money. And those need to be engaged before I even think about giving my vote on this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Walker.
Madam Chair, if I might very briefly respond, I would say that Matt Walker, for the record, on behalf of the Southern Nevada Home Builders, we are very supportive of protecting these funds and keeping a healthy fund balance. When it was initially proposed that fees be reduced, there was a large agreement among stakeholders on the Building Enterprise Fund Advisory Committee that fees not be reduced, that these were simply excess revenues caused by several large projects that came through the system, and that reducing fees would put us on a trajectory to then not meet the needs and service levels associated with the Building Enterprise Fund. We still have key retirements happening in that department. We have great needs and difficulty in recruiting engineers and other key professionals in those departments. So again, we want to see a healthy fund. We strongly believe it's transparently managed, and we think that this is just a confluence of two circumstances where this one-time deviation from the current protocols is something that's not just good for the community, but it's also good for the development community at large. And I'll leave it at that.
Senator Hansen.
Thanks, Madam Chair. First, I'd like to compliment my colleague. It's very nice to sit with somebody who has so many years of experience on this committee. Question, in the beginning, Mr. Walker, you mentioned that currently big developers will frequently pay the expenses to build a fire station. Is that correct?
Matt Walker, for the record, yes, that's correct. And not only large residential developers, but also folks developing a casino or other large project of regional significance often will either contribute in full or in part to the construction of additional fire stations.
Okay, so if we shift the cost to the enterprise fund, that means they get to pocket the difference, correct?
Matt Walker, for the record, Senator, if you mean that by paying, by sweeping...
Right now, Matt, if you have you're a big developer and you have to build a fire station, it costs $5 million, and now the enterprise fund is going to pick up that $5 million cost, that means you don't spend $5 million bucks. And my math right on that?
Senator Hansen, Matt Walker, for the record, on behalf of the Southern Nevada Home Builders, I think you're hitting on a dynamic that is a good question. However, I think it's because of the way that the Southwest is uniquely developed. There simply are no large enough parcels for there to have been a master developer situation. And even the remaining parcels are 10 acres, 40 acres. And so there never will be a project of regional significance coming in this area being served by these fire stations. Nobody is skating off of their responsibility under this bill. And I think if you look at the maps of what's remaining undeveloped in this portion of the valley and where these fire stations are proposed to be located, I think it's pretty clear that there is no a developer swooping in with a project of regional significance to save the day. And we're certainly not targeting any developer at all for relief from their current requirements under their existing development agreements. There are some large developers in that area, and they have stepped up and followed through with their commitment under their development agreements to make fire stations available. So that's specifically Southern Highlands and Howard Hughes Corporation.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Does this relate to any other municipalities in the state, or is it just in the specific area that we're talking about in Clark County?
Matt Walker, for the record, on behalf of the Southern Nevada Home Builders. Because the bill in Section 1, Subsection 1B calls out 278.02591, that is a planning process that can only be undertaken by jurisdictions and counties that are larger than 700,000. And so we're certainly capturing jurisdictions that have established a building enterprise fund, are in what is now Clark County under these population limits. And lastly, they have a fund that's funded over and above the statutory reserve caps in 354. So under those confluence of factors, Clark County is the only local government at the moment that could take advantage of this bill.
Thank you. Vice Chair Orenshaw, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Senator Scheibel, for bringing the bill, and certainly explosive growth you have in your area in the Southwest. And my question, I think I spoke to Mr. Walker earlier about, I appreciate you talking to me about the bill, was that, I represent an area on the opposite end of the town, up in the Northeast, but a lot of unincorporated Clark County, and we're constrained on growth, but if growth if we were to have a similar explosion on growth, if development, would something like this be able to try to help parts of, it's not just limited to the southwest part of Clark County. It could be used in other parts of the city and the county to help, if growth were to explode. I think that's kind of what you had guided me through, Mr. Walker. It's not, even though it will immediately help your area, it could be applicable in other parts of either Clark County or other parts of the state, correct?
Melanie Scheibel for the record. Thank you, Senator Orenshaw, for the question. That is correct. I will note that there is also the expiration on this structure, so that would have to happen in a very timely fashion. But we have seen growth in Las Vegas at astounding rates in the past. So certainly it's not limited by statute to any particular area.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Senator Scheibel. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Additional questions or concerns? Okay. Any additional comments from you? Mr. Walker?
Matt Walker for the record. I know that patience is probably wearing thin on hearing from me, but I just did want to mention in response to Senator Neal's question that Joanna Jacobs from Clark County is on the line and available, and we certainly appreciate their expertise, and they're obviously much better folks to speak to how those transfers would take place, et cetera. I certainly didn't mean to speak for them, but hope that my comments were helpful.
Thank you very much. Senator Neal, would you like to ask some questions of Ms. Jacobs? Broadcasting, if you can pull up Ms. Jacobs, I don't know if that's possible.
Stand by 1 minute, Chair. Callers, if Joanna Jacobs is on the line, if you could please press *9 now. Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. If you can please press *6 now to unmute yourself. Thank you. Chair, you're now connected, Ms. Jacobs.
Thank you. Ms. Jacobs.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for entering the phone line with us. Senator Neal had some questions for you, so hang on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Ms. Jacobs, I wanted to know why isn't your annual capital program being used to fund this effort?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Senator Neal. Thank you for the question. You are correct, Senator Neal. Can you hear me? I'm sorry, I'm having connection difficulties. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Neal. Sorry, I was hearing a little bit of static. So you are correct, Senator Neal. There are a multitude of ways that we can fund fire stations. And one of them is through our general fund, which is our capital program, as you noted. There is a second way, as you also noted, through the Clark County Fire District, which is funded through property tax and C-tax, both of which, well, C-tax especially took a hit through the pandemic, but is returning. Those fire stations are also funded, as Senator Hansen pointed out, through development agreements, and so those are the three ways in which they are funded. We were approached by this idea by the stakeholders, as Mr. Walker has stated, that it is an opportunity to fund fire stations, as he said, I guess in a quicker way than we usually do. We do allocate funds from that capital fund through the Clark County Fire District, but that is not only for the capital cost of constructing a fire station, it also goes towards fire equipment and so fire trucks and all of their equipment that they need. So that is in the definition of capital that goes through that fund. Clark County Real Property Management, as you know from the bill that we did with Clark County that you approved through this committee, does manage a very large capital program, and we have quite a volume that we have to maintain. These can be paid through our capital fund, but it may be delayed. This is always subject to our board oversight and approval. So I cannot speak for the board and say that when they review a capital program, what they may choose to fund or not. That is something that is always subject to our board approval.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. And then my next question was around your revenues. So if you know you're rebounding in terms of your revenues, especially C-tax, then why not just wait? Why is this bill necessary if you know that the hit, because everything was proposed, when I looked at the minutes, this was discussed in 2020, early part of 2020. Nobody knew what was going on, and nothing was clear in terms of where we were going to land, how long we were going to be in the pandemic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now you know. Now you've reopened. Now you know what your balances are, and so your projected loss isn't necessarily as large as you thought. And so why not just wait and use the proper funding to take care of the fire stations? Because I honestly feel it is your responsibility out of either capital improvement, maybe even through some special bonding. There are districts out there that already have special assessments where you could do an additional levy. I just don't understand why not just wait if you know that ultimately your budget is going to bounce back enough to at least take care of 2 fire stations. We shouldn't be in a position where you want to go into the enterprise fund for fire stations. Like, that shouldn't even be a discussion.
Matt Walker for the record on behalf of the Southern Nevada Home Builders, and I'll provide the initial answer because I think it's definitely fair to say that we're requesting the bill. This bill would fund the fire stations much faster than waiting for any of those fees to accrue and then going to design on the project. Secondly, I think it's incumbent on growth to pay for growth. So instead of it pulling away from capital needs of less fast-growing areas or more stagnant areas that are in need of services but don't necessarily have revenues associated with their area that would specifically pay for these critical services, I think it's incumbent on us to capture the revenue from fast-growing areas and put them to use for the services needed for those fast-growing areas. And again, that's why the Southern Nevada Home Builders Association supported a 100% increase in the PF&A fee for the Southwest and indexing the fee to inflation going forward. And it's why we're bringing this bill to get the fire stations built quickly, have the response times reduced, and allow for the capital improvement funds and other revenue sources to be used for broader countywide needs.
So I think I read what that was. So what was that, you said the P&F fee, what was that? That was the increase of 21%?
Thank you, Senator Neal, for the question. Matt Walker for the record. That's the Public Facilities Needs Assessment Fee. So a PF&A is a study undertaken by local governments under 278 to assess the need for public infrastructure, whether that's fire stations or sewer, that are going to result as the anticipated development in an area comes in. And those needs are then assessed through an impact fee on those parcels as they come in and develop. And so that's the PF&A fee that we're referring to that was adopted back in 2001 that, again, did not keep up with the construction costs and inflation and led to this gap.
But what was the increase? How much was it? I thought I read that it was an increase of 21%.
Matt Walker for the record on behalf of the Southern Nevada Home Builders. Nat Hodgson, can you correct me if I'm wrong, but we doubled the Public Facilities Needs Assessment fee for the Southwest and then indexed it in future years to inflation.
Matt Hodgson for the record, that is correct, and there's also another increase that's scheduled to go into effect.
So what's the number? Is it 21%? That's what I'm asking.
Matt Walker for the record. So it was 100%, and there may be an additional 21% scheduled.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. Any additional questions from the committee? All right. If you don't mind, we'll go to support, opposition, and neutral. Broadcasting, when you're ready, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. If you would like to testify in support of AB 139, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 978. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi again, Madam Chair, and members of the committee, Joanna Jacob, JOANNA JACOB, Government Affairs Manager for Clark County. I wasn't sure if I had to re-log in, Madam Chair, but I went ahead and did so. Senator Neal, we are in support of this bill, I guess just to follow up, because it is limited. I would like to very much emphatically say that on the record, that when we were approached with this idea, we did want to see this sunsetted, and we believe that this is a snapshot in time, that we have the reserve because of the large-scale commercial construction projects, and then this may not happen again. We are in support of this because of the needs assessment that we did, that was testified to today, that it will fund a critical public safety need in our community, and we are hoping to do so. Those timelines in the bill are very tight for us. We can transfer the funds at the end of the year. Construction timelines within Clark County, I know that you've heard our testimony on this before in our previous bill, can be very long. And so we believe that to get through design on some of these projects, which may involve BLM approvals, Senator Hansen, as we've talked about this in this meeting before, can take quite a bit of time. Once we get through that design process, which can be a year or longer if it involves BLM, then we have approximately 9 to 10 months, possibly a year and a half or so to do construction. So under the tight timelines in this bill, we are hoping to be able to do at least one fire station and then to see the sunsetted, because we believe that if there is an economic downturn again, that this may not happen again. We did want to see this controlled. We will not be here to seek the lift of the sunset. You will not see that from Clark County. We are in support of the bill as it stands today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, callers. If you recently just joined us, we are currently still in support of AB 139. To testify in support, please press star 9 now. Chair, you have no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you very much. We'll go to opposition.
If you would like to testify in opposition of AB 139, please press star 9 now. Caller with the last 3 digits of 534. Please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Yeah, this is Skip Daly, D-A-L-Y for the last name. Speaking on behalf of myself only, in opposition, not that I'm against fire stations or trying to improve the level of service anywhere in the state. The concern is greater even after listening to the testimony here. I hear Mr. Walker say, well, we can get into this enterprise fund because we're over 50%, and I can see the wheels turning of local government saying, hey, well, let's hurry up and get our other enterprise funds up over 50% so we can also then fund capital improvements, nothing in connection with the enterprise fund's original purpose. I hear legislators on the panel saying, hey, well, this might be able to be used in my area. And I see future legislators starting to then say, hey, well, we're going to extend the sunset and various things. So the sunset only lasts as long as until it doesn't and somebody extends it. And I've seen plenty of sunsets in this building over the years get extended time and time again, and until they just get completely removed. This is a bad idea. Whoever it was in the communities that let the development go and let the level of service for the fire departments go, those people are responsible for letting that growth develop without having a way to pay for their fire stations. You should look at 278C, tax increment districts. You can do a special assessment district under 271. There are a variety of other ways to fund this. This is just a bad idea. It's bad government. It's bad policy, and it's going to be bad precedent because as an observer of human nature over my 60-plus years of living, it's consistent and predictable. This is a bad idea, and I'll hate to have to say I told you so at some time in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Additional opposition callers?
Chair, you have no more callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you very much. We'll go to neutral.
If you would like to testify neutral on AB 139, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, you have no callers neutral at this time.
Thank you very much. And with that, any closing comments from any of you?
Thank you so much, Chair Dondero Loop. Melanie Scheibel for the record from Senate District 9. I want to thank the committee for taking the time to hear this bill and for engaging with us, and let you know that I remain available to answer questions and continue to work through concerns on the bill, as do I'm sure that Mr. Walker will speak for himself, but I'm sure he will tell you the same.
Thank you very much.
Matt Walker, briefly, Madam Chair, on behalf of the Southern Nevada Home Builders, I would just say that I am greatly appreciative of the great dialogue here today. I think that this is a creative solution with representatives of various levels of government who represent an area that see a need and really wanted to roll up their sleeves and solve it. And we're very thankful to the development community for pitching in and bringing this idea forward. Lastly, I would say that what prevents a local government from building up an excess fund reserve specifically to come back with a bill in the future along these lines is that fees can only be increased as much as the construction inflation under NRS 354 without state oversight and approval. And so we think that there's important safeguards not only in this bill but already in statute that would limit local government from being able to take advantage of this in anticipation that a future legislature may allow them some flexibility. We are committed to having responsible levels of fees, and as Mr. Hodgson mentioned, we are carefully watching the Building Enterprise Advisory Committee funds and look forward to continuing conversations there to ensure that fees are in line with the needs of those various departments.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for your presentation, and I appreciate your time today. And with that, I will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 139, and we'll open the next hearing on Assembly Bill 245, and we will welcome Assemblyman Flores. Happy to have you, sir. Welcome to Senate Government Affairs. Please go ahead and take a minute, get yourself organized, and begin when you're ready.
May I proceed, Madam Chair?
Please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, esteemed members of the Senate Government Affairs Committee. I am Assemblyman Edgar Flores, for the record, proudly representing Assembly District 28. That's Northeast Las Vegas. And I am here to present Assembly Bill 245. Madam Chair, if I may offer a quick roadmap of how I intend for the conversation to proceed. I'd like to first just walk you through the genesis of this bill, what brings it before you now and what we're trying to address. Next, I will briefly walk you through how I believe this bill addresses that specific concern. And then afterwards, I'll hand over the presentation to Mr. Mike Draper and Ms. Gail Anderson, who can provide some additional information along with how we've worked through some of the amendments to get to the reprint that's before you today. Madam Chair, if I may take a quick personal point of privilege, as I know my little brother is watching and today is his birthday. Just wanted to say happy birthday to my little brother, Eduardo. I love you, brother. I'm very proud of the man you've become. And I just wanted to do a quick shout out to you, brother.
Absolutely. Happy birthday. We're always happy to celebrate birthdays.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much for taking that time to do that.
Thank you for allowing me the indulgence to do so, Madam Chair. Again, Assemblyman Edgar Flores for the record. I've had the opportunity to specifically work within this section of the NRS, namely NRS 240 and 240A. Now, even before I had the privilege of being an elected member since 2013, I had the honor of publishing a study through the University of Austin, Texas Journal, where we talked about the access of legal services within the legal community here, better said within the Southern Nevada community here in Nevada. And I mention that because this is a specific section of the chapter that I've been incredibly involved in for a lot of years before I even thought of running for office. And every year that I've been in office, I've come back and have had the opportunity to work within this section. From 2013 to 2019, the genesis and the emphasis and the focus and the energy has been on going after bad actors. We've come back session after session going after predatory businesses who take advantage of good old Nevadans who are just trying to get some help. And there's folk, you've heard a lot of the notario issues of folk pretending to be attorneys and taking advantage of members of the community. And so I think we've done a great job collectively as members of the Assembly and Senate to push forward that specific NRS. Now the focus is on, we have all the language in place. We put a lot of language over the years on how to go after some of these bad actors. And now the emphasis and focus has been on how do we focus on helping the good actors. All those small businesses who have been impacted very severely, as many of you have been impacted in 2020, how do we help them grow and become a little bit better? And how do we help these small businesses really have a successful model in the state of Nevada? And that's where the conversation is today. And then with that, how do we continue to allow them to grow so that we continue to put some focus on some of those bad actors? So that's the two-pronged approach to today's conversation. And if I could do a quick shout out to both Dave and Monica from Fingerprinting Express, who are small business owners, and they've been, really working really in depth with me. And if I could also do a quick shout out to Rafael Arroyo from Smog Plus, who also, there's an amendment in here that we'll talk about that is now part of the reprint. And again, these are just good actors, good small businesses doing the right thing. So here's how I think we could help them. Like a lot of small businesses, I share how 2020 was very difficult. My business went through a very rough time as well. And the bottom line is, how do we help make small businesses make money? And so as we start walking through the bill, I'm looking at page 3 specifically, section 1.5. One of the first things that we talked about, and I had an opportunity to speak with Mr. Draper on this particular issue, is for a very long time, we've capped how much they can charge for notary fees. And we've capped it, and we haven't changed that amount, even though the fee for you to buy a stamp, the fee for you to get your notary book, the bond, everything else has gone up. All the costs for you to operate as a notary in the state of Nevada have gone up, and yet we've had a stagnant number of what you can charge. And so Mr. Draper will further go into more detail, but if we look at neighboring states, we saw what the best practices are, how much can they charge, and understandably, this is just saying we're creating a ceiling of how much they can charge. We're not saying they have to charge this. We know that some banks don't charge, right, for notary services. There may be some law offices that don't do it. We're not saying they have to charge this. But I'm really focusing in on the small businesses where they try to have a model where they work with these tiny little margins and that they now can maybe just charge a little bit more so that they can actually make it pencil out and that it works, that the math works. So you'll see that the numbers, we just simply triple them, right? So they could before charge $5 for an acknowledgement, now it goes up to $15. Each additional signature of each signer goes from $250 to $750. Administering an oath and affirmation, $250 to $750, and so on. I know you can see that yourself, but that's the purpose of doing that. I'm looking at page 4, and I know there is some additional language on page specifically 3, right above that, and I'll come back to that in a second, but I just want to go through the numbers so that we're on the same page. So on page 4, you'll see where it says, any additional fees, I'm looking at lines 7, 8, 9, and 10. You'll see under sub D, sub 1, it says, if the person requesting the notarial act asks for the notary public to travel between the hours of 6 a.m. and 7 p.m., they can now charge $5 more. And then if we continue further down, we're looking at lines 11 through 13. It says, if the person requesting the notarial act asks the notary public to travel between the hours of 7 p.m. and 6 a.m., it goes from 25 to 30. Again, the purpose of being able to do that is so that they can just charge a little bit more and make it work. On page 5 specifically, and page 6, I want to get into the second prong of the purpose of this bill. And as we've mentioned, in the past years, we've had a very heavy focus on going after bad actors and focusing on creating language that allows us to do that. But one of the issues we've had is with enforcement. As you know, you can create all the laws in the world, but if we don't have an enforcement component to it, it's very difficult for us to really allow for the legislative intent to play out. And that's where this triggers. So presently, if you're applying for to become a document preparation service for the first time, you'll pay a $50 fee. We want that to go up to $100. And then in the second page, the renewal fee is of $25. We want that to go to $50. That specific amount of money, that extra $50 and extra $25, they'll make that real quick. The small business will make that within a few signatures because they're going to be able to charge more. But the purpose of wanting to have that extra additional cost is that we want to be able to make sure that that specific money can only be utilized for education and enforcement of going after some of these bad actors. And that's where we think we're going to put a lot of teeth in this and give the opportunity for the Secretary of State's office to have an officer that can go after every time a complaint is raised or brought forth, that they can go after that individual because we're actually giving them a little bit of resources now to be able to do that. And this is the industry providing the resources to keep the industry in line, more importantly, because the quicker we get rid of the bad actors, the greater benefit to the good actors, so that they're not competing in an unfair market where they're doing everything right and the other players are not. If we continue with that conversation, and that's why Ms. Gail Anderson is here, one of the other things that we're doing is ensuring that we give the Secretary of State's office the ability to assess a civil penalty. So presently, as we stand, they are limited in what they can do and really revoking when somebody is not in compliance, when somebody's not acting the way they're supposed to, or somebody's not even licensed. Really all the Secretary of State's office has, as a resource in their toolbox, has always been to revoke. But it doesn't make a lot of sense to necessarily pursue that route because we understand that just because a small business is out of compliance, the best thing to do is to bring them into compliance so they can continue to operate in this space. But right now, because their hands are tied, Secretary of State doesn't have a lot of options with that. So what we're allowing for them to do is, instead of just revoking a license, saying, come back into compliance. And Ms. Gail Anderson will go further into that. On top of that, the civil penalty fees that we're talking about, I will now then go back to page 3, lines 9 through 14, where it says a notary public who is registered to engage in the business of a document preparation service may perform a notarial act on a document if the notary public has received or will receive directly from a transaction relating to document fee or providing document preparation services, in addition to the authorized pursuant to NRS 240. that's just a lot of verbiage. I'll simply go into it by saying Ms. Gail Anderson will further go into that. This was an issue identified within the industry where they realized that there is a perceived conflict in the businesses being able to notarize these particular documents. And they couldn't do it because of the way the NRS was presently written. So Ms. Gail Anderson will go into that to explain specifically how they found that middle ground to work with the stakeholders in that particular realm. With that, Madam Chair, thank you. I know I walked rather quickly through that, but if I could, go to Mr. Mike Draper first so that he could continue to provide some overarching perspective, and then if we could hand it over to Ms. Gail Anderson, who obviously is here to present it in a neutral capacity, but she's here to explain how all this works. Would that be appropriate, Madam Chair?
Yes, I'm sorry. Ms. Anderson, please go ahead when you're ready.
Madam Chair, if we may proceed first with Mr. Draper.
Oh, okay, Mr. Draper, you may go
Madam Chair.
first.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Chairman Flores. And before I start, I think it's important to point out the coincidence that, if I'm not mistaken, this bill on the Assembly side was heard on the Chairman's father's birthday, and today is brother's birthday. So we might refer to this bill as the Flores family birthday bill from here on out.
Well, I'm starting to get suspect now.
For the record, my name is Mike Draper from Argentum Partners, and I'm here today representing Fingerprinting Express. And it's always a pleasure to appear before this committee, and I appreciate your indulgence, Madam Chair and committee members. Also very much appreciate Chairman Flores' leadership on this. This is something he's been working on for many years, and certainly Ms. Anderson and the Secretary of State's office has also been working on this for many years. As the chairman said, this bill is really designed to support notaries in the state, many of which are small businesses or even part-time businesses. And in the long run, we think this bill will help those part-time businesses become full-time businesses, and those full-time businesses employ more people. So we do really hope that the significance of this bill isn't underestimated. Certainly notaries are a often overlooked but very important cog in our economy and our society. However, we have not addressed this statute and what notaries can charge for more than 20 years. Nevada is one of several states that outlines in statute what a notary can charge. And our state right now is at the lower end of what most states allow their notaries to charge. The numbers that Mr. Flores just worked through were not picked out randomly. They still keep us competitive with other states, albeit in some areas we're at the higher end, but we're still well within the middle of what other states allow their notaries to charge. It also really addresses the discrepancy of what it costs to be a notary. In some cases, the cost of being a notary just in the last 10 years has gone up as much as 4 or 5 times. For instance, just the notary book, the cost in the last 10 years to have the notary book that we're all familiar with that you sign has gone up by 4 times. Furthermore, we've seen many people come into this space that are notaries, that do get their license, that don't do things the way they should be doing. And it's often left to other notaries to go and fix that mess and remedy that issue for clients. So we do see, not only does this bill allow notaries to charge more, but we do see this as being very helpful for small businesses and many of the notaries and businesses we talk to that would appreciate making sure that only the good actors are in the space and that everyone is operating on the same playing field and doing things in an upstanding manner. I had much more that I was going to say, but I know that this committee has been going for a couple of hours now and still has more on the agenda. So I'm hoping to also earn a gold star from you, Madam Chair, and keep my testimony short. I think the chairman did a very good job of presenting the bill.
Oh, Mr. Draper, you can get more than 1 gold star for not talking any longer. Thank you so much. We'd love to hear from you, but you're right. We've been here 2 hours. Thank you so much, and we still have another bill to hear. So we really appreciate it, and we will move to Ms. Anderson if she is ready. And Ms. Anderson, you don't need gold stars because we know how hard you work all day too. So you're here with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Good afternoon, almost evening. Gail Anderson, Deputy Secretary of State for Southern Nevada. And as Chair Flores has indicated, we're here in the neutral position on this bill, but certainly can address some of the things that are covered. And particularly, I want to thank Assemblyman Flores for his attention and his work in this area of law. He understands the practices and the issues and the needs and has always been willing to listen to what the concerns are that come up, and certainly with constituents as well as our office. So I oversee the Document Preparation Services Program for the Secretary of State, and the program for the state has a staff of 2, one administrative assistant who handles all of the registration processing and the bond monitoring, and then one compliance investigator 2 who handles a statewide caseload, usually ranging between about 145 to 180 investigations and examinations at any given time. And I think Assemblyman has also mentioned we've been stepping up the enforcement aspect of this law, which originally was just get people registered. The majority of our caseload is predominantly unregistered activity, advertising issues under the law of how advertising is to be done, and then practices that suggest the registrant is providing advice or recommendation to a client about possible legal rights and remedies and options, or the selection of documents and strategies, which is legal advisement, which is in violation of this law and would require a licensed attorney to do those things. So we do our best to address and stop those activities, which are quite rampant in the community. Document preparation jurisdiction is in chapter NRS 240A and NAC, and it gives us the ability to revoke a registration for violations of the chapter, or to suspend for a cancellation or a lapse of their bond. But there has been, up until this point, since the inception of the law, no fine authority, only outside of a criminal or civil proceeding in court, which is a long and more expensive process. So in section 3.6 of the bill, the fine, the civil penalty authority in the bill would give our office a much better way, more timely and more get their attention for a registrant to respond to our investigator, to address the concerns that we have raised that need to be changed, that practices that need to be complied with under the law as a result of an examination or a complaint that has been filed with our office. But the fine authority also is for unregistered activity. So since the program's inception in 2014, unregistrants, there are people who started to register who never finished, who registered 1 year, let their registration lapse, or that we have notified by a cease and desist order that they need to be registered and they continue to not be registered. So we are also asking for civil penalty authority for unregistered activity. And these both, any penalty would be imposed after a hearing. So that is the civil penalty portion of the law. In Section 1, I just want to comment, and this is in the notary chapter, Section 1, subsection 3 in the first amended version of the bill. What this does is it gives a document preparation service the ability to prepare a document and notarize the document they have prepared. The document preparation service is a scribing process, and they would maybe prepare a document such as for the Department of Motor Vehicles, a title transfer at the direction of the client, and then also be able to notarize it. Of course, they're prohibited as a notary from notarizing anything in which they would have a direct beneficial interest or be a party to the actual document. Those are prohibitions that exist already in notary law. And you can see in the bill just above Section 3, Section 2, already in the law, there is a provision for a licensed attorney to prepare a document and a filing and also be able to notarize it. So that is what this clarification is in subsection 3 of Section 1 of the bill. I think the last thing I'd like to address is Sections 2 and 3 of the bill provide a funding increase in the initial application fee as well as the renewal fee. And this would be an enhancement which also has been addressed in Section 3.3 of the bill, where already the fees that are paid for document preparation service registration are in an account. They are accounted for separately. They are used for only specific purposes. And enhanced is the purpose of also being able to support personnel, and that is Section 3.3, subsection 3, that has been added to advertising, technology needs, and other administrative costs. So specifically, our office has submitted an unsolicited fiscal note. I'm just going to reference it. That is not this committee, for an additional compliance investigator 2 position that would be funded entirely by these separately allocated and fees that come in, and would not be any general fund cost. It would all be supported by this. So the intent of this sections 2 and 3 of the bill has been to enhance enforcement of NRS 240A. And with one statewide investigator, that is quite a challenge. We do examinations as well as investigate complaints statewide to be able to handle that caseload. So again, at zero cost to the state fund. So I think I've addressed the sections, unless there's a question that Assemblyman Flores particularly wanted me to address. And of course, I'm available for questions, but thank you for this consideration.
Thank you so much for your time this evening. Assemblyman Flores, did you have some additional information you'd like to give us?
No, Madam Chair. Assemblyman Flores, for the record, not at this time. We're ready for questions.
Okay, perfect. All right, questions. Senator Earnshaw.
Thank you very much, Chair. And Assemblyman Flores, thank you for your leadership in this area, trying to make sure that people are not, improperly going to someone who's not who they claim to be. Just wondered, my question for anybody who'd like to handle it, does either the Secretary's office or law enforcement or the Attorney General get involved very often right now when there is someone, who is not complying with the law in the notarial space?
Thank you for that question, Senator Earnshaw, through you, Madam Chair. Assemblyman Flores, for the record, I know Ms. Anderson will have some additional input. But what I will say is, while, for instance, if somebody were pretending to be an attorney and they cause irreparable harm to a particular member of the community, we've put language in the past that it becomes a felony. But getting law enforcement to actually go after them, right? Getting Metro to get an investigator out there, put a case together, get all the pieces of the puzzles in place, has been almost an impossible task. And it's not that law enforcement doesn't care about these particular crimes. It's just honestly that they're overwhelmed with so many other things. And them going after one particular bad actor in that scenario is very difficult. The Nevada Bar doesn't get very involved because they're not attorneys. So we've consistently had an issue with the Nevada Bar getting involved in this space. And the Attorney General's office, I think, while is well-intended and always willing to listen, I think also has a limitation in resources that I'm referring to. So I think even though there's others that can come into the space, I think Ms. Anderson would agree that unfortunately it's probably the Secretary of State's office who's carrying that torch and trying to go after these bad actors. And I know she has some additional data points that she can go into.
Thank you. Gail Anderson, Deputy Secretary of State. I agree with all that Assemblyman Flores said. We do have some contact with the State Bar. We are referring a couple of things to them to see if they will perhaps do something. We do work with a deputy in the civil section of the Attorney General's office who is excellent. We do have a matter right now in civil court. It's been delayed. We started it in 2017, and there have been various legal delays and then COVID delays. That is proceeding forward. And I believe there has been some action on that same matter on the criminal side, but that's not public at this time, so I can't comment on that. But those are fairly exceptional, large money, well-substantiated matters that if we take them that route. But we do everything we can, and our cease and desist orders, the fine penalties will help us. And then we can take to civil court for actions if someone doesn't comply with the cease and desist. So we'll be doing that more often as well, because we've issued now over, I want to say 20 cease and desist orders this fiscal year, taking aggressive action on that.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Deputy Secretary of State Anderson, and thank you, Assemblyman Flores, for the answer.
Thank you very much. Additional questions? Senator Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So to Ms. Anderson, I just had a question on the section 3.6. This is on the civil penalties. Are they retroactive? Because the sentence says that whether a person is still registered at the time of the hearing, so as long as they were a registrant at the time that it was committed. So it seems retroactive, but how far back can you walk back and assign this $1,000 penalty?
Gail Anderson, for the record. The intention there is if we have substantiation of a violation that occurred during the time a registrant was an active registrant, that we could take action. They may have let their registration go, expire, and no longer are active, but we're not retroactive in the sense, except for the time the actual violation occurred. If they were registered, they come under the jurisdiction of this authority. What is the intent?
Thank you very much. Any additional questions? All right. With that, Assemblyman, if you don't have any more comments, we will go to public support, opposition, and neutral. And broadcasting, please go ahead when you're ready. So,
thank you, Chair.
Sorry, just a minute, broadcasting. We actually have a live person in the audience that we would like to ask to join us at the table. Thank you, Mr. Kruger. Apologies, I missed my cue. Please go ahead when you're ready.
The hour is late, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. Peter Kruger, representing the Registration Services Association, Nevada. For all of you that wonder what that is, especially our members from Las Vegas, you'll notice there are people who pay a fee to have other people stand in line, and now the lines are just incredibly long since COVID and beyond. So that's who the registration services part. It was at least 3 sessions ago that Mr. Flores brought what we call document preparers under the guise of, or under the authority of his document preparer legislation. That includes our members. We have worked very closely and very supportive of this bill, and think that with some changes he made that affect our members, but for the good, we will do better in keeping bad actors away from the public. So with that, we're in support, and due to the late hour, that concludes my testimony.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kruger, and thank you for joining us here in person. All right, I believe broadcasting, we now can go to online callers in support.
Thank you, Chair. If you would like to testify in support of AB 245, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 300, please slowly spell and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi, this is Dave Pappas with Fingerprinting Express, PAPPAS, testifying in favor of AB 245 on behalf of our 25 notaries that work for Fingerprinting Express and dozens of notaries that I've worked with and spoken to over the last 10 years. Most notary republics can only afford to work part-time as a side gig, and they must have a full-time job. By passing this bill, you allow people with many of them with limited education, single parents, the ability to open up a professional service business with flexible hours and earn a livable wage. If you raise this fee, notaries can get one client an hour to earn at least $15 an hour, equal to what many legislators are pushing for as minimum wage. The initial cost a notary public must endure is the class, the bond, EO insurance, application fee, stamp, professional notary journal, joining the Professional Notary Association. This alone adds up to $275. That's over 50 signatures just to break even. In addition, a mobile notary needs reliable vehicle, gas, insurance, registration. They need a LLC, pay state, county, and multiple business licenses. Additionally, need a website, digital marketing for Google, Yelp, Facebook, Instagram. All this costs thousands and thousands of dollars while only charging $5 a signature. Becoming a notary is the lowest bar to become a professional service entrepreneur. If you raise the fee allowed to be charged, this would create many new business owners, many from low income situations. It allows them a flexible time schedule to work around their busy personal lives while earning a livable wage. A notary license stays with the person. It does not belong to a business. We employ 25 notaries. If or when the employee leaves us, they're required by law to take their notary designation with them. I really appreciate your time and consideration of the bill. Thank you so much. Dave Pappas.
Thank you very much. And broadcasting, I think he was in support. So if there's nobody else in support, we can go to opposition.
Yes, Chair, you are correct. There were no more callers in support. And your line is currently open and working, and you have no callers in opposition either.
Thank you very much. Then we'll go to neutral.
Chair, your public line is still open and working, and you have no callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you very much. And with that, Assemblyman, do you have any additional comments? Okay, happy birthday to the brother. Hope he enjoys his day. Sorry his big brother isn't there. And with that, I'll close the hearing, and we'll open the hearing on Assembly Bill 307, and we'll welcome Assemblywoman Martinez. Thank you very much. Thank you. And go ahead when you're ready, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair. Oops, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Good afternoon, Chair Dondero Loop and members of the Senate Government Affairs Committee. For the record, I'm Assemblywoman Susie Martinez, and I'm pleased to present Assembly Bill 307 for your consideration. So Assembly Bill 307 seeks to improve the lives of Nevada workers by providing information on how to access the tools and resources needed to advance their career and future. The Department of Employment Training and Rehabilitation, which would be DETR, is probably best known for operating the state's unemployment insurance system. But the agency has so much more to offer Nevada workers. This is especially true for those who have been dislocated from a job and are trying to re-enter the workforce or are underemployed and wishing to move up the career ladder. Assembly Bill 307 requires DETR to prepare one or more notices concerning job training or employment programs conducted by the department and provide the notices to the Labor Commissioner. The Labor Commissioner must make such notice available to each employer in private employment in the state and require each employer to post and maintain each notice in a conspicuous location at the workplace. One of these job training programs includes the Career Enhancement Program, which is the employer-funded training and re-employment program that provides job seekers with training and resources to improve their earning potential. This program will also assist job seekers with paying job-related expenses such as certifications, work permits, uniforms, and even small tools in order to facilitate their entry or re-entry into the labor force. This is just one of the critical and valuable programs that already exist, but I suspect most people might not be aware of their existence. This could help the worker sitting in the break room who is anticipating that they may be dislocated or displaced for circumstances out of their control. It could help their workers' families, friends, or colleagues who may have been dislocated or displaced and are seeking to improve job skills. Regardless, these programs can't help people if they don't know it exists. So with me, I will have Nevada Labor Commissioner Shannon Chambers, who can answer technical questions related to the enforcement and communication aspects of the bill. I'll also have with me Deputy Administrator from DETR, Carlene Johnson, who can answer questions regarding the existing job training and employment programs provided by DETR. So we're open for any questions.
Thank you very much. And Assemblywoman, I just want to let you know that I'm going to have to duck out of here in just a minute. So we're going to start with questions, and then while we're doing questions, I will excuse myself to go to my finance meeting that I need to be at.
Understand.
And I'll leave this in able hands with my other committee members. So Senator Neal, did you have a question? You want to go to finance? Okay. Right. I'm actually checking with Chair Brooks. So go ahead, Senator Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just have one question, which is, like, I guess, business services for DETR, they're supposed to have those relationships with businesses, and so how are they tied into this? Because it's their role to actually build those relationships, and also through Workforce Connections, they all have, well, now it's all rolled under DETR for business services, to build those relationships with employers and let folks know about the different programs, because they were trying to build them all under, bring everybody under one house. So are they going to be doing this work?
Ms. Johnson, can you help me with that?
Yes, I can. Carlene Johnson, ESD Deputy Administrator, for the record. So business service offices located in the north and south deal with employers that we can get into contact with. There is an untapped pool that may not be aware of the services that we have, but any business service representative that is contacted or contacts businesses within the community does advise of all the different programs and services that are available through Job Connect offices and the business service offices.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was it.
Thank you very much. Any additional questions? Vice Chair?
Just a brief comment. Thank you, Assemblywoman Martinez, for bringing this bill. I think it can help a lot of people. Thank you, Chair.
I agree.
Thank you, Senator.
I agree 100%. I think this is a good, strong comment. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional comments from the committee? All right. With that, broadcasting, if we could go to support, opposition, and neutral.
Thank you, Chair. If you would like to testify in support of AB 307, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, you have no callers in support at this time.
Thank you very much, Broadcasting. And now can we go to opposition? I don't see anyone in the committee room. Is there anyone on the phone lines who wishes to speak in opposition to the measure? We're allotting 2 minutes per caller.
If you would like to testify in opposition of AB 307, please press star 9 now. Vice Chair, you have no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you very much, Broadcasting. We'll now go to neutral on the measure. I don't see anyone in the committee room. Is there anyone on the phone lines who wishes to speak neutral to the measure?
If you would like to testify neutral on AB 307, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Vice Chair, you have no callers neutral at this time.
Thank you very much, Broadcasting. Assemblywoman Martinez, thank you for presenting the bill. Any closing comments you'd like to make?
I would just like to say thank you for the privilege of your time and your consideration for Assembly Bill 307. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Assemblywoman. We'll now close the hearing on Assembly Bill 307. The last item on our agenda, make sure I'm not missing anything, is public comment. I want to make sure I wasn't forgetting a bill. Don't see anyone in the committee room who wishes to make public comment. There's no one here. Broadcasting, is there anyone on the phone lines who wishes to make a statement under public comment? We're allotting 2 minutes per caller.
Thank you, Vice Chair. If you would like to speak in public comment, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Vice Chair, your public line is open and working, and you have no callers at this time.
All right. Thank you very much, Broadcasting. Thank you, members. I know the hour is late. We are adjourned.